You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to the Supernatural Chat Show with your host, Sean Cadman, only on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to this week's issue of the Supernatural Chat Show with me, your host, Sean Cadman. Well, tonight's guest, I can say it's truly an honour and a privilege to have tonight's guest on. This year is taking a back seat from virtually everything to concentrate on other avenues and other projects. So it's a true honour to have this guy on tonight. He's absolutely phenomenal. Two-time Paraforce UK speaker, award winner, author. He's been on numerous TV shows, you name it, this guy's done it. It's an absolute privilege to welcome Malcolm Robinson onto the show. Good evening, Malcolm.
A very good evening, Sean. It's a pleasure to be on your show. It's really, really enjoyable. Great to be here.
Thank you. How are you then? How's things?
Yeah, it's gone very well. Like you said a moment ago, I'm taking a year out of lecturing, etc., to involve myself with other projects. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I've been giving lectures all over Europe since 1989, at least 2 or 3 lectures somewhere in Europe. And I just decided that I'm going to take a back seat. I'm going to concentrate on writing my 6th book, which encompasses a whole range of stories pertaining to ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs, Nessie, lake monsters, a whole shooting match. Plus, I've got a lot of, I want to do a wee bit of travelling, etc. But once that's completed, then obviously in 2019, I'll be back with a bang. I'll be lecturing everywhere. People will be getting fed up of me. Not that guy again. And but yeah, I mean, it's been a long road. 1989, 2 or 3 lectures a year. Been a long road, but I just needed to take this break. I mean, I was obliged to kind of lecture at Weston-super-Mare at the beginning of this year, but due to the inclement weather, as you know, Britain was got in the grip of a big storm,
Yeah.
And with snow and ice, and I couldn't get over to Weston-super-Mare, and I was due to present 3 lectures there, which I couldn't do, of course. So obviously those 3 lectures I'll be giving here in my hometown of Hastings later this year. The first one is on July the 27th, and I'll be speaking about conspiracies, of which I'm sure you'll agree, Sean, there is a hell of a lot.
Just a bit.
Just a bit. And I'll be speaking about, did we really go to the moon? There's all these suspicious photographs. We'll be looking at the whys and the wherefores. I'll be looking at 9/11. Who were the real terrorists? And I'll also be looking at Pearl Harbor. You might say, well, is that a conspiracy? Well, actually it is, because America knew that the Japanese were due to attack the fleet at Pearl Harbor, but they sat back and did nothing. And I'll explain all about that as well, So I'll be giving that in July. I've got another one after that I'll be speaking about fairies and elementals, or the wee folk. You know, like say we have the Jinn, we have the trolls in Norway, the leprechauns in Ireland. I'll be speaking about the Cottingley fairies, which, as we all know, was sadly a big hoax. Although, having said that, one of the women involved says, you know what? We actually did, though. We did see those fairies at Cottingley Beck. So I'll be showing a lot of photographs, doing the interviews, etc. And that's on the 18th of August, that one. And then on Saturday, the 22nd of September, I'll be speaking about cellular memory. And has it got anything to do with the paranormal? That in itself would be a lecture on your show, which I won't go into just now. So it's something different. What I try to do, Sean, is present different types of talks because there's so much out there. So, because I didn't get to Western, I'm doing those talks here in Hastings. Apologies again that I came out of your own Paraforce talk for this year. I had to come away from the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference in July, which I was co-hosting with Alison Dunlop, and also a Knocked Back Probe and one or two other ones. So it's purely just to take that back seat and do other things.
Yeah, I mean, I fully understand the guy with the workload that you've had, like I say, for the last few years. Sometimes you need that break just to refresh the batteries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've turned down a lot of radio shows as well, but you're my good friends, so I can't let you down. Okay.
I'm over the moon when you said that you'd come on. Absolutely fantastic. So going back into a bit of your history, it's going back to the Loch Ness thing, really. That you went down into the murky depths of Loch Ness. Is it 1994 in a submarine?
That's very true. I mean, as a young boy growing up in Scotland, my father told me all about the tales of this creature. We call it a kelpie, a water kelpie, that inhabited the murky depths of Loch Ness. And I grew up with all these wonderful tales. And I decided as I grew older to visit Loch Ness. We went on family holidays, as a young boy, 12, 13. And I was absolutely amazed by the place, captured by the place, captivated by the beauty that is Loch Ness and the stories surrounding it. And then many times I travelled up, camped on the shores of Loch Ness, interviewed the local witnesses who claimed to have seen this long tapering neck with small heads and some humps, on the water surface for a few seconds, diving back down. I interviewed a very controversial character called Frank Serrell, who's sadly no longer with us, whose photographs, to say the least, are very suspicious. The vast majority, if not all, of Frank Serrell's photographs turned out to be pure hoaxes. And in 1994, as you mentioned, I was fortunate enough to go down to a depth of just under 500-600 feet. In the Loch Ness submarine. It was a deep-sea submersible, about 25 foot long. It was sponsored by Swatch Watches. And boy, it was confined in there. It really was claustrophobic. If you were claustrophobic, it would be a nightmare for you. The submarine itself had, on the front nose of the submarine, had a very toughened portal. Above the portal was about 7 or 8 very, very powerful halogen lights. On the floor of the submarine was another toughened portal. And we dived down to, as I say, a depth of at least 400 or 500 feet. And the loch floor was just like sandy silt. There were a few water vegetation here and there. And it was a wonderful experience. Now, admittedly, I'm sure your listeners want to know if we saw anything. We never did. We never even saw any fish, because one would imagine that fish would be, wow, what's this bright light in our domain? What is it? We'll go towards it. But no fish strayed into this powerful beam of light. They obviously stayed away. And it was the best hour of my life. It really was. And if it ever comes back to Loch Ness, I truly would go down and participate in that adventure again. It was great.
Yeah. So, it's something I'd love to do, but like I say, claustrophobia, I don't know if I could cope with that. I think I'd panic once we got down there.
Yeah, a lot of people probably would. In fact, I spoke to the skipper of the submarine, and I purely posed that question. I says, look, has anybody actually been in, fear of their life when oh yes, Mr. Robinson, oh yes, we had this gentleman come down, he was, I can do this, no problem to me. And they were only about 20 feet under the surface of the lock, and he just absolutely panicked. Get me out, get me out, get me out of here. He just went from being a brave guy to a small guy who was very frightened for his life. So, it's just one of these things. But I got a certificate after that, and it said, I'm a member of the illustrious Submariners Club, which is great, And,
wow. All right. I think you've been investigating for longer than most people. You always see on Facebook people say, I've been investigating the paranormal for 15 years, for 20 years, etc., etc. And you've been doing it since the 70s. Have you seen many changes over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a hell of a lot of changes. When I left Scotland, there were only a couple of UFO groups operating in Scotland. There's well over at least 24 now, which is great, which is fine. And there's a lot of changes in England as well. The internet really has came up leaps and bounds since I left Scotland. And so much information can be gained on the internet. Sadly, and I'm sure you'll agree, a lot of it is absolute rubbish, false information. Having said that, though, it is a good tool to speak to your colleagues and get that information. Our society, Strange Phenomena Investigations, we get lots of photographs of various things. Some of them are these orbs, some of them are UFOs. We have ghostly photographs sent to us. And we have to obviously have a look at that and find out for sure if there any validity to the claims and also to the photograph. They say a picture can say 1,000 words. But again, like I've said in my lectures, we're living in the Steven Spielberg age of DreamWorks laboratory, where anything can be manipulated on a computer to look like a ghost, to look like a UFO. But thankfully, that same technology can be applied to any given photograph, and it will show if there's a fine thread supporting a model. With colour enhancement, pixel separation, you can clarify any given photograph to suggest if it's true or false. So technology can work both ways. But it truly annoys me that we have all these apps where you can put a ghost into a family photograph or a UFO in the sky. And I'll tell you what, some of them look really good. But again, and then we have the drones. These little drones that take wonderful aerial photographs, which is starting to be a concern to ufologists like myself. And the reason being, Sean, is that at night time, if a drone is flying with some small lights, it can look very suspicious. If you don't know what it is, you could perhaps think it's a UFO. Yeah. So we've had all the Chinese lanterns, which gave rise to many false UFO reports. Now we have these aerial nighttime drones, and some people might think there's something else, but so there's a lot to investigate. The vast majority of UFO reports can be explained. I say that, in my lectures, 95% can be explained, but boy, oh boy, the 5% that remains is really wonderful, fantastic.
So, do you think some people with drones now are deliberately setting out to try and fool investigators?
Possibly. It's a possibility. It could. I know, for instance, back in the 60s, there were strange wee devices, not drones, not back in the 60s, at Cradle Hill in Warminster. They flew these kind of little kites with lights on them to fool all these sky watchers, and that gave rise to a few false UFO reports. I'm not so sure if that's going on in Bonnybridge, which is the UFO capital of Scotland. I have not had or heard any reports of drones being misconstrued as a UFO, but that's not to say that they haven't been. So we just have to be careful, Sean. As investigators, it's our job to get an answer, and the vast majority are natural answers.
Definitely. I mean, over the years, you've you've done ufology, obviously it's probably what you're best known for, but you've also investigated some pretty serious paranormal cases, I think. Which do you prefer to do? Have you got a preference on either of them, or just whichever comes up you enjoy?
Good question. I mean, I'll be honest. I always say that my heart always lies with the paranormal. My fascination for life after death, poltergeist, spirit, communication is absolutely fantastic. It's really, really large in my life. And don't forget, I set out to say what a lot of bloody nonsense all this carry on is. There are no such things as ghosts. There are no such things as UFOs. I'm going to prove that they're not. How wrong was I? By Christ, I was wrong. Yes, there's a lot of shenanigans. Yes, there's a lot of wool being pulled over the eyes of researchers. But once you shake all that away, once you get rid of all that rubbish, you are left with some amazing cases, you know. And boy, oh boy, I wish that your listeners could have been with me on some of the cases, seen, felt, smelt, experienced what I've felt on these investigations. And it brings the question, though, Sean, it brings the question, but what constitutes evidence? Is it a good photograph? No. As I mentioned, it can be faked. Well, what about a piece of video footage? No, it can be faked. I think it comes from the person themselves. You know, if they have seen something and they know they've not been taking drugs, they're not on any medication, maybe a family member has passed on and they've came back to say, you know, we're still here, then they know for sure that they have had that experience. And you've had, I'm sure, Sean, you've had many, many tales of individuals coming to you and say, you know what, this happened to me. And they just need someone to tell, because who did it tell? The family members won't possibly listen, but they need to speak to an authoritative body, people who deal with these things on a regular basis. Now, we're not experts. I'm not an expert. I know next to nothing, but I can only say that being in this field from a young boy, since probably 15, 16, seriously, you know, that the evidence is overwhelming. Absolutely, when you look for it. Yeah,
it is. Like I say, when you scrape away all the stuff that's around it and reach what's really under there, it can blow your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the joy of being an investigator, because there's so much you have to do. There's so many dots, you know, cross the I's, dot the T's. If that's the right way around, I'm not sure. But you've got to do all that, because if you don't, the skeptics will say, but did you try that? Did you look at that? And if you don't, then, Malcolm Robinson can't be doing his job. He failed to look down that avenue. So you really have to look at all those possible avenues. I mean, with UFOs, of course, you're looking at the national airports, the small provincial airports, the Met Office, the Ministry of Defence, flying clubs, a whole range of places to get answers for, to find out if there were any air traffic in a given vicinity at a given specific time where an alleged UFO was seen to occur. Sadly, some of the airports and that won't always give you that information, so you're still left, you know, without the answer.
Yes. You've investigated rather a famous poltergeist case as well.
Absolutely. Well, re-investigated it. That was the. Are you referring to the Socky poltergeist?
That's the one, yeah.
Well, I mean, I was only a wee boy when it initially occurred in 1960. I was only about 3 or 4 years of age, and I re-investigated it in 1987. But very briefly, the story was that young Virginia Campbell, she was 11 years of age, and her family came over from Donegal in Ireland to Scotland. Oh, she did not want to go. She had her family, she had her friends, she had her wee dog, Toby. But you're going, we're all going to Scotland. Oh, I don't want to go. And so she very reluctantly had to move with her family. And a few months later, as they were in their house in Socky, strange things started to happen. It started off with knockings, rappings, bangings on the wall. Then a heavy chest, a linen chest full of, sheets, etc., pillows and, covers, rose up 2 or 3 inches up off the floor and bang, right back onto the floor. It got so bad that the local minister came in to bless the girl, and he saw next to Virginia's head as she was lying in bed, there was another pillow next to her bed. Whoop, it depressed down as if a secondary head was lying on the pillow. And then the headboard started to rattle and rattle and rattle. And then the local minister came in as well, local doctor came in, and they all saw strange things happening in the Campbell household. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, the events followed her to school. Absolutely. They followed her to school.
Wow.
And a couple of occasions, back in the 1960s, in Scottish schools, and I dare say British schools per se, there were at least 50 kids or so crammed into a classroom with the old wooden desks. Well, it was the same in Socky. Virginia, all the class were writing away, writing with their pens and paper on it, and suddenly the teacher looked up and saw Virginia with her forearms firmly pushing down on her desk lid. And the teacher said, "Virginia, stop that. What are you doing?" "I'm doing nothing, miss." "Stop it now. What are you doing?" So Virginia then took her forearms off the desk lid, and the desk lid started to go up and down, up and down, up and down, and the desk itself rose up about an inch off the floor and fell back down in front of a terrified class. On another occasion, Virginia approached the teacher's desk with her essay and laid it down on the teacher's desk. Back in 1960, Sean, the teachers had a wooden cane for obviously pointing to the blackboard.
Yeah.
This wooden cane was lying flat on the teacher's desk. Then suddenly it started to vibrate, and it started to rise up vertically. It started thudding down on the desk, the teacher's desk. And Virginia said to her teacher, "That's not me, miss. I'm not doing this, miss, honest, I'm not doing this." And then at that point, this heavy, big 1960s teacher's desk, about 6 feet in length, rose up a couple of inches off the floor and twisted and turned right round. Now, whereas before the teacher had her stomach in front of the large part of the desk had turned round 90 degrees and her stomach was now facing the narrow end of the desk. At that point, all the kids just rose up in unison from their chairs and rushed towards the door, the classroom door. So the teacher at that point went to open the door for the children. She couldn't open the door. She was pulling the door handle to open the door of the classroom to let the children out. She says, "Malcolm, it felt like there was a big man at the other side of the door pulling it shut as I tried to pull it that way." And it went on for a good few months, and then it just dissipated. You know, the house was blessed, etc. Virginia eventually moved away to somewhere in England. We don't know where. And it stands the test of time of one of the most amazing poltergeist case in the annals of Scottish history. Now, I was fortunate enough, as I mentioned, to reinvestigate this case. I spoke to several of the classmates. They're older now, of course, when I interviewed them, and they went, "Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes." I remember that very, very well. I interviewed the teacher. She says, "Malcolm, I didn't even know what a poltergeist was. I was oblivious to all this stuff. But now I know what it was, and I'll tell you what, Mr. Robinson, I truly, truly saw this. These events did happen." And it's like these events, Sean, you would love all the skeptics to be in that location at that time and see this, you know. There were no strings, pulleys, wires or trip wires. It happened. And I know one of the best books I've read on poltergeists is The South Shields Poltergeist by Darren Ritson and Mike Hallowell. And that is a scary book. Your listeners should get that one. It's great.
I mean, why do you think that case didn't sort of receive as much publicity, etc., as the Enfield?
Yeah, I mean, well, it did at the time. Admittedly, it did receive initially in Clackmannanshire, where Socky is situated. Then it went to various parts of Scotland, and I believe it did go overseas. But obviously, in later years, the Enfield case, and I've interviewed Maurice Gross. As you know, he's no longer with us, and also Guy Lyne Playfair interviewed as well. Sadly, he passed away, which itself was a massive, massive case. Even the police officers were hit by pebbles going into the house and saw a chair move across the linoleum floor. But yeah, you're right. Enfield was a massive case, and how I wish I had been involved in that one. I remember Maurice Gross gave a lecture in Edinburgh University many years ago when he was obviously still living, of course, and he played the sound recordings of Janet's voice with this man's voice taking over her voice box. And do remember, they had given her water to hold in her mouth and sellotaped her lips together, and this voice came out of her mouth. Yeah. And people could still hear that. Again, there were evidence of trickery there, but, you know, they were just trying to please the investigators. Although, having said that, the case had enough substantial evidence to say, well, you know, the vast majority of what happened at Enfield was real. It was visible by many people who came to the property, and they all went away scared for their lives. They really did.
I mean, do you think there's more cases like this that just all over the country that are happening sort of right now and over the past few years that I think due to the scepticism there today, they're just getting dismissed?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, same with UFOs. For two that see a UFO, how many people who were there at the time will not come forward? They're frightened. People are frightened to report this. And that is a sad fact that with any given case of this nature, there are a number of researchers who say that the poltergeist effect is purely because of sexual puberty, the children going through pubescence, etc. What a load of nonsense. For me, that is absolutely rubbish. It's nothing to do with the change in the bodies and the sexual chemistry. Because you think, Sean, think about it. If that was the case, you would have hundreds, nay thousands of poltergeist cases in Great Britain because of the people going through puberty and that. So I just do not understand why some researchers say it's all down to the changes in the hormones and body shape and rubbish, absolute rubbish, you know.
I think that sort of goes into some of the strange explanations for anything paranormal or supernatural, really. I think it's sometimes people clutching at straws and looking for an easy explanation.
It's as bad as the Rendlesham Lighthouse. That's another story.
You mentioned that people are frightened to come forward when they've seen like UFOs, etc. Linking into that, what's your thoughts on the Men in Black? Are they real?
Well, for sure, we know for a fact that certainly in America, where these reports initially came from, that there were these men in black who visited UFO witnesses to more or less, you know, tell them to don't say anything, don't say any more, or if you do, certain things is going to happen to you, which won't be nice. Now, these were all documented. I dealt with a case in Wales, in Dyfed, West Wales. It was written up in Peter Paget's book, The Welsh Enigma, is it? And also Randall Jones Pugh book, The Dyfed Enigma. I interviewed Elsie, the name escapes me just now, it'll come back to me, who stayed in the Havenfort Hotel. She was the proprietor at the Havenfort Hotel in Broadhaven, which is in the Welsh Triangle. Now, back in 1977, that area saw a hell of a lot of UFO activity. And as I was sitting in this lovely Fort Hotel, speaking to this lady, and she says, "Oh, yes, Malcolm." She says, "I remember on one occasion there were a knock on my front door at the hotel. I opened the door, and standing in front of me were these two strange people. They had black jackets, they had white shirts, they had black ties, black trousers, and a black trilby hat. But," she says, "Malcolm, the most amazing thing was their faces looked like China dolls. There was like those China dolls, you know, and they spoke very gutturally. And they asked, what they said to her was, 'We are looking for Pauline Coombs.'" Now, Pauline Coombs is a big player in the Welsh Enigma. She stayed at Ripperston Farm, and that farm saw a lot of UFO activity as well. And she says, "Look, I don't know where she is. I do not know where she is." Then the two strange men in black, turned sideways and walked very strangely like a mechanical robot. It sounds crazy, They walked like a mechanical robot back to this elongated black car without any wheels, which was sitting on the gravel driveway and just disappeared down the track. And I mean,
wow.
These are stories that are very prevalent in America initially. We have, a good 100 or so cases here in the United Kingdom. I just, people might say, okay, well, who are they? What are they? Are they aliens? Are they walk-ins? Are they government agents? I believe that perhaps more so in America, they may well have been CIA or FBI agents just trying to find out a wee bit more from the witnesses. As to if they could be alien, well, certainly in the Havenfort Hotel case, they certainly did not appear to be human for sure. And this woman, she remembers it like it was yesterday.
Wow.
Her name was Rosa Granville. It's just come to me. Rosa Granville was the proprietor at the Havenfort Hotel when I interviewed her. She also said on one occasion she heard a strange noise coming from the back of the hotel. She pulled the curtain back, looked out, and she saw these two beings bathed in white light. It was like a stick or some rod prodding it into the ground. And I know this sounds silly, but she says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And at that, they just rushed into this device and it just took off into the sky and was gone in seconds. And these are just stories that have been told to me by many countless thousands of people through my years of involvement in this wonderful, wonderful subject.
So I can imagine getting a visit of something like that's even more scary than actually seeing the UFO in the first place.
Yeah, I suppose it could be. But I mean, it angers me about these UFO abductions. And I've said it on many shows in the past, these UFO abductions are still occurring. Here in 2018, we're getting people taken from cars, from their own bedroom, in traumatic circumstances. Evidence would seem to suggest that they've been taken since childhood. And their family members have been taken from childhood. It's like a genetic pattern, if you like. Now, these some of the female abductees have been shown this hideous half-human, half-hybrid child, and telepathically they have been told, "This is part of you." Now, it sounds a wee bit Hollywood, it sounds a wee bit outrageous, but what also angers me is they're still doing it, Sean. Now, as some researchers would say, that's purely for a genetic thing. They're taking sperm and ova from males and females to repopulate a dying planet. I don't know. They've been doing that for over 60, 70 years, collecting this. Is it, as some researchers would have us believe, it's maybe something to do with the very soul of humankind? That's a strong possibility as well. Make no bones about it. My research has clearly shown to me personally that we are dealing with a non-human intelligence that's probably always been with us, Sean.
Yeah.
And but what I can't understand and I can't provide the answer for is why. Why are we still getting these abductions? Whitley Strieber's had them. So many high-profile people have had them. You know what? It sounds daft, but I wish it would happen to me.
I know exactly what you mean by that. It's funny because me and Sarah, my wife, were chatting last night. We were watching Ancient Aliens on History Channel, and all of it seemed to be about the looking at destroying Earth, the destruction of humankind, and we got talking. It's like, well, surely if they've got the technology to travel thousands of light years to get to us, surely they've got the technology to wipe Earth out in one foul swoop without even thinking about it. So why is everybody stuck on the idea that they want to destroy humankind? Yeah,
there are some people who think along those lines. I'm not so sure I'm certainly one of them. I think probably the answer lies in physics and quantum mechanics. I think it's a dimensional thing. I don't think necessarily they're coming from deepest space. It may be wormholes, it may be bending the universe, but dimensions. Jacques Vallée, the wonderful French professor, he had his views for me are very on the line, on the ball.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with quantum mechanics, neutrinos, quarks, and that's where the answer lies to these visitations.
Have you Cattle mutilations. What's your thoughts on the cattle mutilations as well? Yeah.
Generally, I only like speaking about things that I've personally researched, and I haven't researched any animal or cattle mutilations, so I can only say what I've been speaking in conversation, deep conversation with people who have had these experiences, farmers, etc., who have told me that they have walked to their pasture, they've seen a cow lying there, and various parts have been cored out, surgically cored out, heat cauterized around the area, circular area. The internal organs are missing. There's no footprints leading up to or from the deceased animal. The tongue's been removed. So you ask yourself the question, some people say, well, is it the government just doing experiments? Well, why not do it in your own laboratory? Okay, What about a cult? Maybe it's just a satanic cult. It's a possibility. But let us not forget, more so in America, many strange aerial devices have been seen floating and flying above pastures with beams of light coming down to the fields. And on a few occasions, allegedly, I don't know if it's true, some of these cows being transported up into some kind of beam into the body of the craft. Now, that's whimsical, but people have said that. And don't forget the good work of some of the British researchers some years ago. I know it sounds daft again, but they even found evidence of kind of mutilations on mice, the same type of core effect of birds, of small insects, etc. So it's not just the cattle, the sheep, the horses, it's various animals. And again, it begs the question, what's going on here? And I don't have an answer for that one, unfortunately.
It's maybe one of them things that we'll never, ever know.
Possibly.
Out of all the UFO cases in the UK, which ones you say your favourite to investigate, favourite to keep looking into? Which one do you keep returning to?
Well, there's quite a few. I've recently returned to one, the Pullman Reservoir UFO photograph, which some new information came to me a couple of years ago, which I've been looking into, to suggest that this famous photograph, well, let me tell you the story first. It is quite well known, but basically in 1991, a young man with his friend went out to Pullman Reservoir, which is near the Grangemouth petrochemical plant. Now, this petrochemical plant burns off gas flares, fuel at night. It looks fantastic. It's like a Hollywood film set. So he was there to take some photographs of this area. And suddenly he saw this red ball of light come from the Occult Hills. And it rested about 200 feet above his head. He knew straight away this wasn't an aircraft, and it started to descend on his head. And at that point, he bent over backwards and took one photograph of the underside of this circular object with a concave bottom. It was bright red in colour. It was thrown off light. Well, we did the normal research with the Scottish airports, the MOD, and nothing was flying in the area at that time. However, a few years ago, as I say, this gentleman came forward and says, Malcolm, I know the chap very, very well. He always wants to be in the limelight. He always wants to make a name for himself. And I believe that light, he's photographed a red light, I know it sounds daft, a red light off his guitar amplifier. You know when you switch on an amplifier, that red light, that circular light. Well, he's zoomed into that and took a photograph. And I did an article for the Outer Limits magazine, of which I'm co-editor with Chris Evers, lovely guy. And it was all explained in there. So there's a possibility that this lovely photograph, let's make no bones about it, which I've lectured for many years on, may well be a hoax. Now, The sad thing is we haven't managed to get in touch with Phil Trevis, who was a photographer. And if he comes forward at any time, please come forward. We would like to hear your side of the story. Did you really make this photograph up? Have you tried to dupe the investigators? I'd love to hear his side of the story. I mean, we have his side of the story, but to present the new facts to him, to find out if that was the case. The other famous case, of course, is the A70 abduction case, which you mentioned do a return to. Well, It's always on my mind. The trauma that Gary Wood and Colin Wright experienced on that drive from Edinburgh to Tarbrax in West Lothian, it's always with me, and I dare say it'll always be with the two witnesses. For any listeners who don't know about it, and I'm sure they're not that many, I'll tell you again. August 1992, two men, good friends of one another, were driving from Edinburgh to a small village of Tarbrax in West Lothian. Both had no interest in UFOs. Of course they've heard about it, of course they've saw things on the TV, but they were not really interested in it. As they were driving down the road, it was late at night, well, about 10:30. It was dark. Suddenly, Colin says to Gary, "What the hell is that?" Now, above them, about 200 yards down the road, Sean, was this black two-tiered object hovering above the road. Both men knew that this was not a conventional aircraft or a conventional helicopter. And rather than do a three-point turn and go back, he says, no, let's keep going forward. So as the car was directly underneath this hovering object, bang, a massive big mist, a silver curtain of mist, starry effect, came down and hit the car. And as soon as it hit the car, both men were enveloped in total and inky blackness. They couldn't see their hand in front of their face. They couldn't see each other. They couldn't see the dashboard of where are we? Where the hell are we? And then seconds later, they regained their sight. They put the car into gear and they rushed towards their destination. They knocked on the occupant's door. And she says, the occupant who opened the door says, "Where have you been? You're an hour and a half late." Now, the journey, Sean, should only have taken them 30 minutes. They were an hour and a half later. Now, I'll be very brief because it is a big story. That night and subsequent nights thereafter, they had strange dreams of these grey alien faces coming into their dream world. They then found scars on their body that previously were not there. And they went, surely this cannot be one of these stupid UFO things. But what if it is? What if it is? I mean, where do we go? So to cut a long story short, Gary went to his local library in Edinburgh. He pulled out one of the UFO books, which had our society in it. He contacted me. And at that time, I advocated the use of hypnotic regression as a tool to find out if perhaps any hidden subconscious memory may be lurking in the depths of their mind. We subjected them to hypnotherapy individually, and both men came away with more or less the same story under hypnosis. And very briefly, I won't elaborate, but very briefly, under hypnosis, when the car was hit by this light, they claim that they were taken out of this car by these small grey creatures, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, large pear-shaped heads, black inky almond-shaped eyes, and they were taken on board this object and subjected to some form of medical examination of sorts. And later on, a good few years later, Gary passed a BBC lie detector test on this case with flying colours. He was telling the truth. And I've only gingerly touched the surface of this massive case, and because we'd be here all night. And for me, I totally believe in Gary and Colin. Absolutely. And,
wow.
It's just a crazy case, you know.
Sounds it, definitely. I've got a few questions coming into the chat room. Well, Kaz has asked, Malcolm, do you think there are aliens amongst us we believe are human?
About maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would have laughed at that suggestion, but nothing surprises me anymore. And I would say to Kaz that yes, I think there is a strong possibility that some of the people walking about the streets may well be walk-ins. What that means, I know it sounds Hollywood, bear with me, they've been taken over by some non-human intelligence. Some people in Scandinavia call them the Nordics, these beautiful-looking men with long blonde hair who perform strange, the way they talk to people, the way they float, etc., is a wee bit out of the norm. So I think for sure there are people amongst us who are not who they say they are, shall we say.
Yeah. I've got one from Shirley. She read a book many years ago called Secret Life, a psychologist who recounted live hypnosis sessions of abductees. Have you read about that? Have you read it at all? It talks about hybrid babies.
Is that David Jacobs, The Secret Life, or it rings a bell? I definitely have read it, but I can't remember if it was David Jacobs. Yeah, hybrid babies, like I mentioned before, these females have been re-abducted and shown these children. And so, yes, that's a concern, a very big concern. And there's so many good UFO books out there. And I do believe that people should, drink, if you like, as much of the UFO waters as you can. You really must throw yourself into the subject and digest as much books as you can and make up your own mind. If you may have another researcher on your show tomorrow or whenever, and he would say something entirely different to what I'm talking about. What I talk about this evening is purely based on my own research, what I've seen, tasted, etc. For sure.
I think that's what makes the field so diverse and interesting, though, isn't it? Everybody's got different ideas. Otherwise, if everybody thought the same, then I suppose there'd be no new research or new ways of investigating or anything else that come forward.
Absolutely. I mean, there are still people who believe that the pyramids and Stonehenge and what have you were built by aliens. I don't believe that at all. I don't think we give enough credence to ancient man and the sophistication and the knowledge that he had at that point in time. We didn't have televisions, we didn't have clubs and things to do. All he had was his mind, the landscape, and his ingenuity. And admittedly, some of the sites across the world, like Cusco, where you cannot get a single sheet of paper through the joins, if you like, of these massive, massive big stones. But again, I still believe that mankind built that. Now, people might be listening to the show and say, well, that's rubbish. I think we were helped along here. What I would say is that, you always try to think what's behind us. And at the moment, I still believe that maybe planet Earth is but a zoo. And what I mean by that, Sean, is that we, humankind, that is, we're seeded here by these creatures from elsewhere, and they've been looking over us all these years, to genetically modify us, do this, do that. Again, it begs the answer, what for what purpose, But yeah. I think that we have been seeded here. I don't believe in Darwin, that we evolved from the species. I think there's too much wrong with that theory, the missing link. Neanderthal man, Cro-Magnon man, etc. Well, what's going on here? I think we were put here deliberately.
That's good. That answers a question from Bear Medicine Walker, where she's asking, do you think we're put here by aliens to begin with, and they come back over the years to check?
Well, I certainly answered that one. No, I mean, I do believe that. I mean, but that's just me. And anybody listening to the show, I'm sure you've got your own thoughts on that, and that's absolutely perfect. But I think that's a very, very strong possibility. And it makes you wonder what's going to happen next. I mean, it begs the question, why don't they land on the White House lawn or come to 10 Downing Street, etc.? Yeah. It's an agenda. There truly is an agenda.
There's a different question for you. Gary Bradfield. Going back to Paraforce 2016 at the Galleries of Justice, did Malcolm come up with a rational explanation about the stone that was thrown at him in the dungeon area? I was witness to it, and I know it wasn't thrown from my direction.
Okay, for your listeners, what happened was, as you know, Sean, we did a ghost bust that particular night at the Galleries of Justice in Nottingham. It was after the day's events for lectures, and it was a wonderful occasion. There were many interested parties participated in little groups to do their own thing in these underground dungeons. My God, anybody that's listening to this, Google Nottingham Halls of Justice. And anyway, we were down there, and it had a reputation for a ghost, a spirit throwing stones about. I was there with a lovely guy called David Young, and David and I were just doing our own thing, looking about in the semi-darkness. And where we were walking, there was these flagstones, about 2 feet or so, square flagstones in the ground. And then suddenly, crack! It was like a whip, one of these cowboy and western whips, a bull whip going crack. And I looked behind me, and I got the torch. We had torches, and I put the torch on the floor, and I saw this stone sitting there. So I picked it up, and it was like picking up a hot coal. It was really, really hot. And I says, David, feel this? And, oh my goodness me. And now anybody who knows the paranormal will know that an apport, and an apport, it can be anything. It could be a coin, it could be a stone, can fall from the air. It can happen in seance rooms, haunted houses, or haunted buildings. And generally, when you pick it up, it tends to be rather hot. Yeah. Now, Gary Bradfield, he was in the area, and I know it wasn't him, because you think, well, there are other people about. Could someone maybe have thrown this stone? And maybe the reason it was quite hot was perhaps they were taking an opportunity to warm it in their hands and then throw it. But I honestly believe that there were nobody in that vicinity. I think, if memory serves me correctly, I think Gary and his colleague were further up the stairs at that point. And we did ask them, was it you? And they says no. So it was an experience for sure, yes.
Definitely, sounds like that one. Shirley, what about the massive things seen from the air that are so precise? It's like the drawings in the desert and things like that.
Yes, I think she's referring to the Nazca lines, and which Eric Van Daniken portrayed in Chariots of the Gods, I believe. Now, again, it's getting back to my theory that we don't give enough credence about ancient man, and those designs were of monkeys, of spirals, of snakes, and various other drawings in the dust. Now, they were very, very elaborately done. Now, of course, back in those days, you never had flight. So how could you know for sure that you were doing a monkey, a spiral, or a drawing of a face, etc. in this? You couldn't really know for sure. It was only, I think, from the 1920s, when the first aircraft flew over that region, that they noticed all these beautiful, elaborate, mosaic patterns in the dust at Nazca. And I think it was ancient man themselves who did that through no help of the gods, of Eric Van Daniken. But that's just me. I think just like the crop fields of England, people say that the crop circles are real, that it's UFOs. No, it's not. It's mostly men with boards, and I know quite a lot of them. I've been asked to make a crop circle, and I have refused to do it. And people say, well, Malcolm, these crop circles are very, very elaborate. They're hexagons, they're boxes, etc. But it's so easy, When you've got a team of people, they've each got a segment of that to crop to do their own little bit. And once they've done it all, it looks beautiful. And I will say this, a good friend of mine, Matthew Williams, who doesn't do crop circles anymore, so he tells me, and I believe him, he made a lot of crop circles in Wiltshire, Matthew did. And he said, Malcolm, I'll tell you what, Malcolm, he says, one time we were in the fields and these balls of light just dropped from the sky and they were weaving in and out of the crop fields. He says, we don't know what these were. And then on one occasion, we saw this shadowy figure at the edge of the field and we went, oh no, we've been rumbled, it's the farmer. So they walked towards the farmer, but it wasn't. It was a black shape. It just melted into the blackness and was gone. And so even with the hoaxers, they are still a phenomena of sorts attached to the crop circle enigma here in southern England. And so that's strange, yeah.
I mean, that was going to lead me on to the crop circles one, but you beat me to that one. Just check if we've got any more questions. Sarah Coulth Arcades, but perhaps through his interest in aliens, Malcolm is closely followed by them.
Well, because I'm a researcher, I've put myself into the ballpark, and what I mean by that is Bonnybridge back in the day was very, very hot, if you like, with UFO sightings. So I was there with SPI members, and we saw a number of strange lights in the sky. It's all written up in one of my books. And because you're there, you see things. I've been to Cradle Hill and Star Hill and Warminster, Avebury and Wiltshire. There are certain locations, it's called a hotspot or a window area, which are more susceptible to see phenomena occurring. Now, why this should be so, we truly don't know. Is it perhaps ley lines crisscrossing, major ley lines causing these effects. But there's no denying. And one of my talks is that I've given last year was about UFO hotspots. We have Gulf Breeze in Pensacola, and we have the Nullarbor Plains in Australia and various other locations which, again, get a higher concentration of UFO reports. And anyone just needs to Google UFO hotspots and you'll see a whole big list of this. And, you have the Pennines in Yorkshire as another hotspot. There's quite a few here in England, yes.
So, in the States, they've got Area 51, which everybody's heard of, everybody knows about. Do you think there's a similar place or the same sort of place somewhere in the UK?
Well, certainly there were various establishments here in the United Kingdom which did store a lot of UFO records. And, as we know, the UFO desk was shut down a number of years ago because they felt there were not sufficient enough reports, and it was a waste of money. But let us not forget that the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, the National Security Agency, they were actively involved with UFO research in America for many years, and they said that they didn't. But under the Freedom of Information Act, passed initially in America, many pre-classified government documents were released to the American people, clearly showing that the American CIA and FBI were looking at the UFO situation. And of course, here in Great Britain, thankfully, a lot of people asked for a Freedom of Information Act to release files to the British public. And again, we were drip-fed these files, which clearly show that the British government probably know a wee bit more than they're letting on. But getting back to your point about Area 51, there's no denying that there's something clearly going on at Area 51. Now, whether it's advanced American aircraft is a possibility, and if so, what's that all about? The large black flying triangles that many people have seen here in the UK, there's no denying that is an accomplishment in itself. These things are enormous, about the size of 2 to 3 football fields, passing slowly and silently above people's heads. And, if that's their own technology, by Christ, we're doing bloody well, I'll tell you that. But I do believe that it's not. That is not our technology for sure. The characteristics, manoeuvres, performance abilities of these lights seen in the desert at Area 51, the G-force involved with these twists and turns is so astronomical, no human pilot could sustain the G-force on their bodies. So I don't think that's their own technology. There's something going on there, yeah.
Yeah, they'll reverse engineering and things. It seems straight all of a sudden they come up with these amazing flying aircraft. It's like, where did they get that from?
Yeah, very, very much so. But by the same token, I must stress to your listeners today that the stealth aircraft, that beautiful stealth aircraft, the V-shaped aircraft, was flying initially in America for a good 10 years before the American military machine put their arm up and says, it's ours. And that gave rise to many, many false UFO reports. There's no denying that there is a program of sorts for new aircraft being developed, circular aircraft. Allegedly, we've had that in Germany during the Second World War. The Germans were trying to use advanced circular aircraft. The Avro car in America is another one which didn't really fly very well. But I think there's still a program of disinformation being fed into the British ufology. A wonderful book by Mark Pilkington is called The Mirage Men. And that almost took me off the UFO fence. That almost made me back to a skeptic again, because that Mirage book tells you that there is a lot of government agents muddying the waters, muddying the ufological waters with a lot of disinformation. We have to be careful what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I can imagine that. They put little tidbits of information out there that people latch onto and then directs them in completely the wrong direction to where they should be looking.
Yeah, but thankfully, the amount of evidence I've gathered personally over the years, and some of the stories I've heard at conferences, people coming up to me and saying, Malcolm, I've never told my husband about this, but I'm going to tell you because you seem to know what you're talking about. And I've heard so many stories. People were just so glad to unfold all these wonderful stories, be it a UFO, be it a ghost, be it a spirit. And it's a wonderful opportunity for me to, rather than just poo-poo these stories and throw them in a filing cabinet, is to put them in a book. It's not to make money, it's to get the subject out there so people can fully understand that mankind is at the foot of a very tall ladder, a ladder of understanding, which science needs to progress. The only way science will progress in these matters if we can get more scientists involved. But the sad thing is, as you know, Sean, many people don't want to come into our camp because it'll ruin their career. And so we have to do all this hard work ourselves.
Definitely. All right, with that, I think we've just now noticed we've run out of time, sadly. We've got to carry it on for another couple of hours here with you, Mel. I want to thank you hugely for coming on. Obviously, wish you all success with your projects this year, with your new book. If anybody listening wants to get a hold of any of Malcolm's books, they are all available on Amazon. So if you jump onto Amazon and grab them all, fantastic reads. Once again, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you want to refresh the page as soon as we've finished, then you'll be able to listen to Penny's show where she's talking with Paul Stevenson about Borley rectories. Again, thank you ever so much, Malcolm, and we'll have to do it again at some point. We'll have to have another chat because there's so much more that we haven't covered.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And don't forget to do, for your listeners, the Outer Limits Conference this September by Chris Evers is occurring in Hull, and also the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference organised by Ron Halliday and Alison Dunlop is occurring in Glasgow. So check that out, Google, folks, and also check out Paraforce Conference as well, because Sean and Vivian as well, fantastic people doing a grand job. Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll hand back over to Penny. Carrie.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.